Polls will soon be closing. We will soon start to talk about exactly what people are saying, what the voters are basically saying with their vote, and who may need to go home. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Ed Berliner, this special edition of The Hardline, as we focus on those states with their primaries and caucuses this evening. We will be here until midnight tonight, bringing you all of the results. But let's talk about one of the states, the state that most people are focusing on today. We like to say that every state making their presidential candidate's choice is unique, but Michigan indeed stands alone in so many ways. Home of the American automobile industry, 5 of the world's leading office furniture companies are there. The state second only to New York in manufacturing military armaments during World War II, birthplace of the awesome Motown music sound. And more to the point of today's news, home to the city in America that is likely the iceberg tip of infrastructure disaster that could be visited upon every major city in the country, and soon. So let's dig into what we might expect from Michigan politically tonight. Our guest is director of the Institute for Public Policy and Social Research at Michigan State University, Professor Matt Grossmann. Professor, thanks so much for joining us. And you heard me there talk about a lot of the great things that I've heard and read and know about Michigan, having been there many times over the years. But what is it in this scenario of this political season that really sets Michiganders apart?
Well, this is our first competitive primary on both sides in 20 years. And the candidates have been here. We've seen the advertising, and we have quite an unpredictable race usually, as there's no party registration, so you can show up and vote in either party's primary on the last day.
Because there's no party registration, some people have been saying that we've got so many polls. We get polls in every single state that maybe they're not going to be so reliable when it comes down to Michigan. We really can't get a handle on the people there. Is that fair?
Well, there are some complexities. On the Democratic side, there's a huge age split. So it really matters whether Bernie Sanders can get these college students who are showing up to his rallies to actually vote, since he's winning people under 30 by 50 points. And Hillary Clinton's margin is all among people over 65 who are much more likely to turn out to vote. Right. On the Republican side, the complexity is there's a lot of people who've decided not to vote for Donald Trump, but haven't decided who among the 3 remaining candidates they'll support. So our polling actually had a brief lead for Ted Cruz earlier in the month, then a brief lead for Marco Rubio, and now it looks like Kasich is gaining the most at the end. So it's not that everyone's decided on Trump, but that the opposition to Trump is split 3 ways.
It's funny, too, because I just on Twitter about maybe 5 minutes ago saw a poll from one of the local TV stations in Detroit that talked about late deciders, and I think this sits to basically what you just talked about. The percentage of people, 35% said they late decided to go for John Kasich, 31% for Cruz, 23% for Trump, and 10% for Rubio. But Michigan's not really a big Republican state, fair to say? I mean, it still basically is a Rust Belt Democratic state, correct?
Well, presidential elections were about 4% more Democratic than the country as a whole, but we do have a legislature and governor completely controlled by the Republicans, so I wouldn't put us wholly in the Democratic column.
What does it tell you then by people who say that they're late, 35% going to Kasich, 31% Cruz, and then backing up with some of the other numbers that you've seen about how people are not necessarily enthralled with Donald Trump?
Well, it's been true in most states that Donald Trump's supporters are not late deciders, so that wouldn't necessarily be a bad sign for him. Obviously, it's good that Kasich that he's getting the plurality of that support. But he started with such a low level of support. In our polling, actually, only about a quarter of the state's population even could name him as a presidential candidate this month. So it's really hard to win when you start with that level of support and even recognition.
When we talk about Michigan these days in the national media, we immediately go to Flint, Michigan, and what has happened there. I alluded to a moment ago. One of Bernie Sanders' biggest moments at this weekend's debate came when he was discussing Flint's water crisis. Now, here's what he said.
What is absolutely incredible to me is that water rates have soared in Flint. You are paying 3 times more for poison water that I'm paying in Burlington, Vermont for clean water. First thing you do is you say people are not paying a water bill for poisoned water.
Make some very strong points. Now, to you then, Professor, what's happening in Flint right now? How do you think that is influencing the rest of the state of Michigan as they watch what's happening there?
It has not played a big role in the Republican contest, but it has played a massive role in the Democratic contest, where Hillary Clinton has been running ads for 2 weeks touting her visit to Flint and her support by some of the local residents and the mayor. Bernie Sanders called for the governor to resign, and obviously they held a debate there on Sunday where they talked a lot about Flint. So it's been playing a big role on the Democratic side, in part as a sort of a proxy battle over who best represents African Americans among the two Democratic candidates. It's roiling state politics completely, with pretty much taking over the budget discussion and overshadowing all other issues at the state level. So having a big effect in state politics and nationally in the Democratic race.
From the Detroit News today, the headline, and written by Nolan Finley, the commentator there, that Flint could backfire on Clinton. It points out that when she was asked in the debate whether the head of the EPA should also step down, Gina McCarthy, Hillary Clinton evaded the whole question, unwilling to hold a Democrat to the same standard of accountability she demanded of the Republican. That was a mistake, was it not?
Well, that might be a bit of wishful thinking by Nolan that it's going to backfire on Hillary Clinton. She seems to have pretty strong support among the state's African-American population. And in a Democratic primary, it really doesn't hurt you to call for the Republican governor to be reprimanded, and even if it's a double standard with the EPA chief. So maybe it'll look worse in a general election contest, but in the primary, not likely to hurt her.
Is it fair to say that Michigan is a very critical showdown for Bernie Sanders to mount that comeback to keep his momentum up against Hillary Clinton?
It absolutely is critical for Sanders, especially if he can show that he's improving his percentages among African Americans and that he's turning out those young people to vote. But even if he wins Michigan, it is a long uphill slog for him. The Democratic states are all proportional. He's way behind. Unless he starts winning these states by 20 points or more, he's unlikely to make up the delegate count that Hillary already has ahead of him.
All right, so let's say then, about the minute I have left here, that we will guess that Hillary Clinton will wind up being the winner in Michigan this evening. What's your take on the Republican side, how that will wind up?
I think Trump's the most likely to win, but some people are touting late surges by John Kasich or Ted Cruz. I think you might see a relatively close race, and I think the news of the night might be Marco Rubio comes in fourth and goes below the 15% threshold, so he may have started out as a potential favorite in Michigan and leave with 0 delegates out of our state.
And that will pretty much put the nail in that coffin as far as so many people are concerned. Even though Marco Rubio and his people swear they're going to be in it until Florida, then again, that's politics. That's the beauty of it as well. Everybody can say they're going to stay, and then they got to start counting the shekels and find out how much money they have to see if they can make it any farther. We will watch and see what happens. The polls close at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Professor Matt Grossmann, thank you so much for joining us. We certainly appreciate it. Let's also point out that we're hearing that in Flint, as a matter of fact, some of the early reports come out and tell us that it is the highest turnout in at least 20 years. We're going to be here until midnight this evening, the entire Newsmax crew. Right now, we're going to send it to New York City, because standing by as he gets ready to look at what's happening here, I'm told that, as a matter of fact, that's going to be the next block, I guess, or the next segment that we're going to come back and we're going to talk about that. So everything's a little fluid here as we head towards what's happening. Stay with us. Our coverage of America Vote 2016 continues right here on Newsmax.